The freezing wind of border town cut through the heavy fabric of my royal robes, reminding me that this bizarre nightmare was entirely real. Just days ago, I was a severely exhausted mechanical engineer dying at my desk from endless corporate overwork. Now, I woke up in the body of Roland Wimbledon, the useless fourth prince of the Grey Castle Kingdom. Before me, a chaotic crowd of filthy commoners yelled and jeered, their faces twisted with primitive, unbridled hatred. They were gathered to witness the execution of a teenage girl accused of being a wicked instrument of the devil. The heavy iron cage on the platform held the young girl, her silver hair fluttering wildly against the gloomy sky. According to the memories inherited from the original prince, this world possessed powerful, tragic entities known as witches. The powerful church pursued these girls ruthlessly, claiming their supernatural abilities were a direct curse upon humanity. As an educated modern engineer, I knew that magic was simply an unexplained force waiting to be understood scientifically. The burly executioner stepped forward, his hands tightening around the rough hemp rope attached to the gallows mechanism. The silver-haired girl looked up, her vivid green eyes locked onto mine with a mixture of fear and absolute resignation. "Stop this execution immediately," I commanded, my voice echoing loudly across the stunned, silent plaza. The executioner froze in mid-motion, his mouth hanging open, as the entire crowd turned to look at me in utter disbelief. Assistant Barov, an old official with a long white beard, rushed to my side, his face pale with panic. "Your Highness, showing mercy to a witch will bring the wrath of the Holy Church down upon our entire region," he pleaded. I dismissed his traditional fears with a cold wave of my hand, keeping my eyes fixed entirely on the captive girl. "In Border Town, my word is the absolute law, and I wish to interrogate this prisoner personally in the castle," I declared. The royal guards hesitated for a moment before moving forward to unlock the heavy iron cage and secure the prisoner. Hours later, the silver-haired witch stood inside my private castle study, her heavy iron shackles clinking softly with each small movement. I walked around the massive wooden desk, maintaining a calm, non-threatening posture to put her at ease. "They say you possess the ability to control demonic, unholy flames," I said, keeping my tone strictly professional. Anna shrank back slightly, her green eyes darting around the room as if expecting a sudden, painful torture to begin. "If you're going to torture me, just get it over with, Your Highness," she whispered with an exhausted, broken voice. I let out a soft chuckle, shaking my head at how deeply the religious propaganda had infected everyone's minds. "I have absolutely no intention of harming you. I merely want to see your unique power with my own eyes," I explained. She stared at me in deep confusion, trying to comprehend why a royal prince would treat a condemned witch with such kindness. I placed the heavy iron coin onto a thick, heat-resistant stone tray, positioned carefully on the center of my desk. "Try to heat this piece of metal up using your flames, and do not worry about holding anything back," I ordered gently. Anna hesitated, taking a deep breath before slowly raising her shackled hands toward the dark iron coin. Suddenly, her emerald eyes flared with a brilliant, luminous green light that illuminated the entire room. A cluster of bright emerald green flames erupted gracefully from her fingertips, dancing through the air like living liquid ribbons. The mysterious green fire enveloped the solid iron coin, instantly turning the dark metal into a brilliant, glowing, white-hot liquid. My engineering mind reeled as I realized her flames possessed a temperature far exceeding any primitive medieval blast furnace. With this kind of precise, high-temperature heat source, I could easily refine steel and manufacture high-quality machine parts. The magical green flames vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving the room suddenly quiet once more. "Anna, you are not a demonic monster. You are an absolute miracle of nature," I told her with absolute sincerity. Her breath hitched in her throat, her lips trembling as she heard words of genuine praise for the very first time in her life. "Work for me. Help me reshape raw metal, and I will grant you absolute protection, freedom, and a life of dignity," I proposed. A small, beautiful smile finally broke through her exhausted expression as she nodded her head in absolute agreement. Suddenly, the heavy wooden doors of my study burst open as a panicked guard rushed into the room, gasping for air. "Your Highness, a hostile army from the neighboring lord's territory has just crossed our borders, and they are marching directly toward us right now," he screamed. I tightened my grip on the desk blueprint, realizing that my industrial revolution would have to survive a brutal baptism of fire before it could even begin. The cold morning air crept through the fractured window panes of Border Town's makeshift castle, carrying the bitter scent of imminent winter. I rubbed my aching temples as I stared down at the nearly empty ledger detailing the town's current financial reserves. The numbers written in fading black ink did not lie about the absolute desolation of this border territory. Barra of Longshore stepped forward from the shadows of the room, his face etched with a look of pure exasperation. He slammed his old hand onto the edge of the table, reminding me that we barely had enough gold to buy food for the coming month. To build a proper defensive wall and start the Industrial Revolution, I needed an influx of capital immediately. I explained to my nervous treasurer that cutting back on expenses would only guarantee our collective demise when the demonic beasts arrived. Instead of hoarding our remaining coin, we needed to invest every single piece back into the hands of the local craftsmen. Barov shook his head in disbelief, arguing that common laborers would never work without guaranteed food rations from the capital. I smiled at his outdated thinking, knowing that a silver coin wage system would motivate the townspeople far better than feudal coercion. Within 2 hours, a grand royal proclamation was posted directly onto the central bulletin board in the middle of the crowded town square. A crowd of dirty, impoverished townspeople gathered around the wooden post, whispering frantically to one another. A literate merchant read the words aloud, revealing that the prince was offering real silver daily for basic manual labor. Murmurs of disbelief quickly transformed into loud shouts of absolute joy as the desperate citizens realized they could finally feed their families. Meanwhile, in the backyard of the castle, Anna stood silently next to a massive pile of raw iron ore. I approached her with a detailed schematic for a modular defensive brick system that would form our new wall. She raised her slender hands toward the heavy iron stones, her green eyes beginning to glow with a deep, mystical radiance. An intense burst of bright green fire erupted from her palms, completely enveloping the raw ore in a matter of seconds. Under my careful direction, she controlled the temperature precisely, separating the pure liquid metal from the useless rocky slag. The speed at which she melted the solid rock bypassed weeks of traditional primitive blacksmithing work completely. By the next morning, hundreds of eager local craftsmen had lined up outside the town gate with shovels and pickaxes. I stood upon a temporary wooden platform, looking down at the crowd of weary but hopeful faces. I announced that we were not merely building a wall to protect my castle, but a grand fortress to safeguard their own families. The workers cheered loudly, immediately picking up their tools to begin excavating the deep foundations according to my blueprints. Traditional construction methods would take months, so I introduced a revolutionary recipe for quick-drying concrete. I taught the local masons how to properly mix local limestone, clay, and gravel in exact scientific proportions. The master mason looked skeptical at first, but his eyes went wide as the slurry hardened into solid stone within hours. With Anna providing perfectly shaped iron reinforcement bars, our new defensive wall grew at an unprecedented pace. Days melted into weeks of continuous hard labor, completely transforming the desolate landscape of the border valley. However, our rapid progress caught the attention of the greedy local nobility who controlled the surrounding lands. Barov hurried back to my office one evening, his face completely pale as he delivered an urgent message from Longsong Stronghold. Duke Ryan demanded a massive tax on all iron ore production, threatening to cut off our vital food imports if we refused to comply. This blatant extortion was designed to crush my budding industry before it could threaten the established feudal order. I walked over to the balcony, staring out at the half-completed concrete wall that stood as a testament to our defiance. Giving in to their demands would only prove that I was just another weak prince, easily controlled by the old nobility. I resolved to refuse the Duke's ultimatum, even if it meant facing a complete economic blockade during the harshest season of the year. We needed to accelerate our construction schedule, ensuring the town's survival through pure, unadulterated engineering prowess. The next day, dark storm clouds gathered over the northern peaks, signaling the premature arrival of the brutal winter monsters. A sudden, piercing horn blast echoed across the entire valley, shattering the midday peace of the busy construction site. From the tree line of the northern forest, A massive pack of mutated, red-eyed demonic beasts charged directly toward our unfinished wall. I ran up the scaffolding to the top of the unfinished barricade, watching the terrifying horde close the distance with shocking speed. The workers scrambled in absolute panic, leaving their tools behind as they fled toward the inner city for safety. Anna stepped up right beside me, her silver hair whipping wildly in the freezing wind as she prepared to defend our creation. The gap in the central section of the wall was still entirely wide open, leaving a massive vulnerability in our defensive perimeter. I drew my ceremonial sword, realizing that our entire industrial future now depended on holding this unfinished line against an army of nightmares. The cold wind howled against the newly reinforced stone walls as the echoes of the dark beasts faded into the night. I slowly lowered my ceremonial sword, feeling the heavy vibration of combat still humming in my aching palm. Beside me, Anna extinguished the remaining green embers that danced along her slender fingers. The guards began clearing the debris below, unaware that our victory relied entirely on forbidden magic. I turned back toward my private quarters, knowing that physical walls were only a temporary fix for our survival. Suddenly, the temperature in the stone corridor dropped dramatically as the ambient shadows began to twist. I gripped the hilt of my sword once more as a figure materialized directly out of the thin air. A woman wearing a dark hooded cloak stepped gracefully out of a swirling, translucent gray mist. She removed her hood, revealing long, cascading blonde hair and eyes filled with deep calculation. "You are the first noble who does not scream at the sight of us," she stated in a low, melodic voice. I sat down at my desk, gesturing for her to speak, rather than ordering my guards to arrest her. She introduced herself as Nightingale, an emissary from an underground faction known as the Witch Cooperation Association. She explained that dozens of her sisters were hiding in the treacherous wild mountains, freezing and starving to escape the church. The Holy See had convinced the entire world that their unique gifts were demonic curses bought with blood. I smiled faintly, pulling a clean piece of parchment forward to sketch a basic atomic diagram. Magic is not a curse from the devil, but merely a form of energy that obeys consistent natural laws, I stated firmly. Nightingale leaned closer, her eyes widening as she stared at the strange geometric patterns on the page. I explained how Anna's fire was simply a high-velocity chemical reaction that could be channeled to purify steel. Nightingale remained quiet, struggling to dismantle a lifetime of superstitious religious dogma in a single moment. "If you bring your sisters here, I will grant them sanctuary, food, and a place to truly belong," I offered. She studied my eyes intently, searching for any sign of typical aristocratic deception or hidden malice. Finding only absolute sincerity, she nodded slowly and accepted the dangerous alliance on behalf of her people. Over the following week, small groups of hooded women began arriving at the castle under the cover of dense fog. I opened the hidden underground chambers of the fortress, transforming the cold vaults into warm, livable quarters. The newly arrived witches looked around in disbelief at the abundant hot soup and fresh bread waiting for them. The next morning, I gathered them around a makeshift chalkboard to begin their first lesson in elementary physics. They stared blankly as I explained the mechanical advantage of levers and the conservation of thermodynamic energy. I knew that to truly unlock their potential, I had to replace their deep-seated fear with structured understanding. One witch named Soraya stepped forward, demonstrating her unique ability to paint magical, durable runes on any surface. I immediately realized her magical ink could serve as an incredible rust-resistant coating for our new steam engine parts. Day by day, the underground network evolved from a group of terrified refugees into a brilliant scientific research team. We worked tirelessly in absolute secrecy, hiding our industrial breakthroughs from the suspicious townspeople outside. With their magical assistance, the production speed of our steel weaponry and structural beams tripled within a week. For the first time in history, these women laughed without fear, realizing their power could build instead of destroy. I watched them progress, knowing that this secret alliance was the true cornerstone of my future empire. However, our rapid progress was abruptly interrupted when an urgent messenger burst into the upper council chambers. He brought word that a militant inquisitor from the Holy See had just arrived at the outer town gates. They had caught wind of unnatural occurrences in Border Town and carried a divine mandate to inspect every cellar. I stood up instantly, realizing that if they discovered our underground sanctuary, it would mean immediate execution for everyone. Nightingale stepped out of the shadows behind me, her hand resting firmly on her dagger as the sound of marching boots echoed outside. Nightingale stepped out of the shadows behind me, her hand resting firmly on her dagger as the sound of marching boots echoed outside. I raised my hand slightly to signal her to wait, recognizing the specific rhythm of my chief knight's footsteps approach the door. The door swung open to reveal the breathless chief commander, who held an official manifest from the merchant caravans. The specialized mining shipments containing mass quantities of saltpeter had finally arrived at our town docks. Without this crucial chemical cooling agent, my ambitious plans to formulate modern gunpowder would remain a complete impossibility. I immediately walked down to the newly constructed laboratory building, nestled safely within the inner castle courtyard. Inside the workshop, Anna stood ready beside several porcelain basins filled with crushed white crystalline powder. We needed to purify the raw saltpeter crystals to ensure the chemical reaction would be stable and explosive. With perfect control, Anna summoned her brilliant green magical fire to heat the solution to an exact, unvarying temperature. Watching her manipulate thermal energy so precisely made me realize once again that magic was simply an unmapped science. Next, we carefully mixed the purified saltpeter with precise measurements of crushed charcoal and yellow sulfur powder. Every movement had to be incredibly gentle to prevent any accidental sparks from igniting the volatile black mixture. Within a few hours, we had successfully manufactured the very first batch of high-grade military gunpowder in this world. Meanwhile, far to the east in the grand capital city, my royal siblings were actively plotting their next political moves. Reports from undercover spies had reached them, detailing the sudden and strange industrial growth of my isolated border territory. They could not comprehend how a desolate wasteland was suddenly producing superior steel and complex mechanical machinery. Fearing my rising influence, my eldest brother immediately ordered a massive detachment of knights to march toward the border. Word of the approaching hostile army quickly reached our town, causing immense panic among the local commoners. I stood atop the newly completed stone wall, looking out toward the horizon with absolute calm and readiness. Behind me, our specialized defense force stood in perfect formation, holding the newly forged experimental flintlock rifles. Nightingale materialized from the air beside me, her eyes locked onto the distant dust cloud created by the enemy cavalry. The royal army believed they were marching toward an easy victory over an unarmed, defenseless town. As the enemy cavalry crossed the outer boundary line, I calmly gave the command to prepare our heavy artillery. Massive iron cannons, engineered using modern casting techniques, were slowly aimed toward the advancing troops. The enemy commander raised his sword high, ordering a full, relentless charge directly against our central gates. Suddenly, a deafening roar shattered the night sky as our artillery opened fire all at once. Explosive shells packed with our new gunpowder detonated directly in the center of the charging enemy ranks. The terrifying noise and unprecedented destructive power threw the entire royal army into complete chaotic disarray. Our riflemen then unleashed a synchronized volley of lead fire, striking down any remaining threats with absolute precision. Realizing they stood absolutely no chance against this advanced technology, the surviving invaders turned and fled in terror. The battle was won decisively without a single casualty on our side, proving the undeniable supremacy of modern science. News of this overwhelming victory spread like wildfire across the entire kingdom, permanently shattering the old political balance. My royal siblings realized they could never match our industrial power and formally signed a permanent non-aggression treaty. With all major military conflicts permanently resolved, a magnificent new golden era of innovation truly began for our town. The local citizens completely abandoned their old superstitions, now living in perfect harmony alongside the safe and respected witches. Huge steam engines now lined the industrial districts, driving automated machinery that brought immense wealth to everyone. Anna stood next to me at the grand opening of the Scientific Academy, holding a modern textbook we had printed together. Nightingale watched over us from the academy balcony, no longer hiding away in fear, but standing proudly in the open sunlight. I looked over the thriving, peaceful kingdom I had built, knowing my past life of overwork had finally led to this ultimate purpose. The Industrial Revolution was complete, and our united world of magic and science would continue to prosper for generations to come.